The mahogany table was a glacier and I was shivering on its edge. Across the cold, polished surface, my parents didn't look at me. My brother, David, sat between them, their shoulders almost touching, a solid, unbreachable wall of shared blood and purpose. I was the ghost at the feast, the afterthought in the somber theater of my own family's final act. The lawyer, an older man named Mr. Albright with kind eyes and a sorrowful demeanor, cleared his throat. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent, book-lined room. This was it. The reading of my grandmother's will. Nana Rose was the only person who had ever made me feel seen, felt like I truly belonged to this family. Now she was gone and the last tether holding me to these people had snapped. My father's gaze was fixed on a distant point on the wall. My mother fidgeted with her pearl necklace, a nervous habit she'd had for years. David shot me a glance that was neither warm nor hostile, just empty. As if I were a stranger who had wandered into the wrong meeting. Mr. Albright began with the formalities, his voice a low, steady drone. I barely heard him. My heart was a frantic bird beating against the cage of my ribs. I knew what was coming. I'd lived it my entire life. The smaller portion. The less favored gift. The token gesture to placate the outlier. I braced myself for the final legal confirmation of what I had always known. In the eyes of my parents, I was less. I was an obligation, not a daughter. But then something shifted. Mr. Albright paused, his eyes scanning the document before him. He took off his glasses, polished them slowly, and then his gaze lifted, not to my parents, not to David, but directly to me. A flicker of something unreadable passed through his eyes, a mix of resolve and pity. Before we proceed to the primary bequests, he said, his voice gaining a new, firmer texture, there is a separate envelope. A codicil. Addressed to me with specific instructions. He held up a creamy, thick parchment envelope, sealed with my grandmother's distinctive dark red wax seal. My father finally looked away from the wall, his brow furrowed in irritation. What is this, Albright? Let's just get on with it. Mr. Albright ignored him. He broke the seal, the crack echoing in the tense room. He unfolded a single sheet of paper. And as he began to read, the world I thought I knew, the family hierarchy I had accepted as law, began to shatter into a million unrecognizable pieces. This story is just the beginning. If you've ever felt overlooked or are drawn to tales of family secrets and emotional justice, consider subscribing to the channel. More stories like this are waiting for you. To understand the depth of the chill in that lawyer's office, you have to understand the landscape of my childhood. Our family home wasn't a place of warmth. It was a museum of achievements, and David was the prized exhibit. From his first Little League trophy to his acceptance into an Ivy League business school, every milestone of his was framed, celebrated, and held up as the family standard. I was the curator of that museum, the quiet shadow in the background. Where David was bold and loud, I was introspective and creative. I painted. I wrote poetry in secret notebooks. I found solace in the quiet company of my Nana Rose, who lived in the cozy, slightly overgrown cottage on the far edge of our property. While my parents attended David's football games, I would be in Nana's kitchen, the air thick with the smell of gingerbread and old books, listening to her stories. You have an old soul, Maya, she'd tell me, her wrinkled hand patting mine. They don't see it because they're too busy looking at the shiny new things. But the old souls are the ones who hold the world together. My parents saw my closeness with Nana as a phase, an eccentricity. Why don't you join the debate team like David? My mother would ask, her voice laced with a genuine confusion that cut deeper than any anger. It would look better on your college applications. My father's praise was always conditional, a transaction. A good grade in math was met with a nod. A painting I'd poured my heart into was met with a distracted, "That's nice, honey. Is the garage clean?" The divide became a canyon. David, emboldened by their constant validation, learned to maneuver the world with a confident swagger. He went into finance, of course, marrying a woman who was his perfect mirror. Ambitious, polished, and equally adored by my parents. I drifted through a degree in art history and worked as a conservator at a small museum, a job my father referred to as a charming hobby. Nana Rose was my refuge. She was the one who bought me my first set of proper whales, who read my poetry and saw the emotion behind the words, who told me I was loved not for what I achieved, but for who I was at my core. The day she passed, a part of me died with her. I had lost my anchor and now, adrift in this lawyer's office, I was about to be swept away by the cold current of my family's disregard. Asterisk stories of complex family dynamics resonate with so many of us. If this is touching a chord, you're not alone. Subscribe for more narratives that explore the intricate tapestry of family love and loss. Mr. Albright's voice cut through the heavy silence, pulling me back from the memory of Nana's garden. He was reading the standard parts of the will first. The bequests to various charities she supported. A sum of money for David. A collection of first-edition books for my father. My mother was to receive Nana's own jewelry collection. With each item listed, my parents' postures grew more relaxed. This was the script they knew. David received a substantial trust fund, designated for his children's education. My father allowed a small, satisfied smile. This was order. This was tradition. Then Mr. Albright looked up. "And to my granddaughter Maya," he said, his eyes briefly meeting mine, "I leave the sum of $50,000. $50,000. It was not an insignificant amount, but compared to the millions in trusts and the value of the property and the jewelry, it was a pebble. A token. Final gentle pat on the head. The air left my lungs in a quiet, defeated sigh. I had expected it, but the confirmation was a physical blow. My eyes stung, but I refused to let the tears fall. I would not give them the satisfaction. My mother turned to me, her expression one of placid approval. "That's lovely, Maya. Nana wanted you to be comfortable." It was then that my father spoke, his voice dripping with a casual, unthinking cruelty that he had perfected over a lifetime. "Yes, it's very generous. It should be more than enough to cover a down payment on a sensible little condo somewhere. It's time you found a place of your own anyway. We'll be putting the main house on the market and the cottage. Well, we'll be tearing that old place down. Prime real estate." The words "tearing that down" hit me with the force of a physical punch. The cottage. Nana's cottage. The place where I had felt more love and belonging than anywhere else in the world. It wasn't just a building. It was a sanctuary, a repository of every happy memory I possessed. They were going to erase it. Erase her. And they saw my inheritance not as a gift, but as a convenient way to get me out of their hair for good. The betrayal was so complete, so utterly expected, that it felt like a death all over again. The pain of being undervalued by those who are supposed to love us unconditionally is a unique heartache. If this part of the story is speaking to you, you might find solace in our community. Consider subscribing for more journeys toward healing. In the ringing silence that followed my father's pronouncement, Mr. Albright cleared his throat again. This time the sound was different. It was sharp, deliberate. It commanded attention. "As I mentioned," he said, his voice now carrying a newfound authority, "there is the matter of the codicil." He held up the parchment paper. The late Mrs. Rose Evelyn Hawthorne stipulated that this addendum was to be read aloud only after the primary will had been presented, and only in the presence of all named beneficiaries. My father waved a dismissive hand. "Some sentimental letter, no doubt. We really don't have time for this, Albright." "I'm afraid it is not a letter, Mr. Hawthorne," Mr. Albright replied, his gaze steady. "It is a legally binding amendment that supersedes certain aspects of the document I just read." He put his glasses back on and began to read, his voice clear and unwavering. "To my family, whom I love in my own complicated way," he read, and it was Nana's voice I heard, her gentle cadence in every word. "I have watched. I have listened. And I have seen the truth of your hearts. A will is not just a distribution of wealth. It is a final message, a last chance to right a wrong." My mother shifted uncomfortably. David was staring intently at the lawyer. "Therefore," Mr. Albright continued, "I revoke the bequest of my jewelry collection by first edition books, and the trust fund established for my grandson David. These were items and funds given out of obligation, a performance of familial duty that never rang true." A collective, sharp intake of breath came from across the table. My father's face was turning a dangerous shade of red. "This is outrageous. She wasn't of sound mind." Mr. Albright ignored him, his voice growing stronger. "My entire estate, including the main house, the financial portfolios, all investments, and most importantly my cottage and the land it sits on, I leave solely and entirely to my granddaughter, Maya." The world stopped. The air vanished from the room. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. "Maya," he read on, and now his eyes were locked on mine, a lifeline in the storm. You were the only one who loved me for my stories, not my things. You were the only one who saw a person, not a bank account. This estate is yours. Do with it what your good and beautiful heart tells you is right. It was always meant for you." He finished and lowered the paper. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the sound of my own heart hammering against my ribs. The revenge was not cruel or vindictive. It was moral. It was just. It was Nana, from beyond the grave, finally speaking the truth they had refused to hear my entire life. She hadn't just given me her wealth. She had given me my worth. The moment of moral payback is so deeply satisfying. For more stories where the quiet ones finally get their due, subscribe to the channel. Your next favorite tale is just a click away. Glacier of a mahogany table was now a throne, and I was finally, truly, sitting at its head. The sounds that broke the silence were ugly. My father sputtering about contesting the will. My mother crying not out of grief for Nana, but out of shock for her lost inheritance. David was silent, a statue of stunned humiliation. They looked at me then. Really looked at me. For the first time I was not the afterthought, the disappointment, the oddity. In their eyes, I saw a terrifying mix of fury, confusion, and a dawning, desperate calculation. I was no longer Maya. I was the executor of an estate. I held the power. Mr. Albright quietly slid a set of keys across the smooth tabletop. They stopped right in front of me. The keys to the main house. The keys to the cottage. The keys to my past and my future. I didn't say a word to them. I just picked up the heavy, cold metal, feeling its weight in my palm. The symbolism was not lost on me. I stood up, my legs surprisingly steady. Mr. Albright gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. I walked out of that office without a backward glance. I left them there, in the wreckage of their own entitlement, scrambling and scheming. The bright sunlight outside was blinding. I felt dizzy, unmoored, and yet for the first time in my life, completely free. I didn't go home. I drove directly to the cottage. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The familiar scent of dried lavender and old wood wrapped around me like a warm embrace. I walked through the quiet rooms, my fingers trailing over the familiar spines of her books, the worn fabric of her favorite armchair. It was all exactly as she had left it. And now it was all mine. There was no triumph in that moment, no vengeful glee. Instead, a profound and aching peace settled over me. This was Nana's final, greatest gift. It wasn't the money or the property. It was the validation. It was her voice, loud and clear from the beyond, telling me that I had been right all along. My sensitivity was not a weakness. My quiet nature was not a flaw. The love I had given so freely was seen, it was valued, and it was being returned 1,000-fold. Finding closure and peace after a lifetime of struggle is a powerful moment. If you're reflecting on your own journey, you might find comfort in our shared stories. Subscribe to join a community that understands. That was 5 years ago. The lawyers handled the fallout. My parents and David did try to contest the will, but Nana had been meticulously thorough, her mental state documented and unimpeachable. They eventually slunk away, the ties between us severed not by me, but by their own reaction to her final judgment. We do not speak. The loss of them is a dull ache, a phantom limb, but the peace I have found has been a far greater presence. I never tore down the cottage. I live in it. I preserved it exactly as Nana left it, her spirit a comfort in every room. The main house, too large and full of cold memories, I sold. The proceeds, along with a large portion of the inheritance, I used to establish a small arts foundation in Nana Rose's name. It provides grants and studio space to young, introspective artists. The quiet ones, the old souls, the ones who don't fit the shiny, conventional molds. Sometimes, in the deep quiet of the evening, I sit in Nana's garden and I think about that day in the lawyer's office. The lesson wasn't about becoming rich to get revenge. The lesson was about the invisible inheritance she had given me all along. The strength to be myself. Her final act was simply to make that truth visible to everyone, especially to me. The world tried to tell me I was less, but she always knew I was more. And in the end, her will was not just a document distributing assets. It was her will, her fierce, unwavering determination, that the daughter they ignored would finally and forever be seen. I wasn't just left an estate. I was given back my story and the pen to write its next chapters. Asterisk, this story of emotional justice and finding one's worth is part of a larger collection. If it moved you and you'd like to discover more narratives that explore the hidden truths within families, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more of these stories to light. Thank you for watching.